Breaking news, in a blockbuster ruling, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court just issued a huge victory for voting rights, ruling that voters who submit so-called naked ballots must still be allowed to vote provisionally and have their ballots counted. Welcome back to Democracy Docket. I'm Marc Elias.
And I'm Paige Moskowitz. Let's get started. In Pennsylvania, mail-in ballots have to be returned with 2 envelopes in order to be counted. One is a yellow secrecy envelope that is placed inside the outer return envelope. Ballots returned without this yellow secrecy envelope are called naked ballots and have to be rejected. Marc, but the state Supreme Court just issued a major ruling regarding naked ballots. What does it do for voters?
Yeah, so this is a blockbuster ruling, as I said, because we have been talking for years at Democracy Docket. There is a ton of content. If you go to democracydocket.com, you will see a ton of content around this perplexing problem in Pennsylvania of naked ballots. So in Pennsylvania, you're supposed to fill out your ballot and not just stick it in the return envelope, but rather put it in essentially a blank envelope that they send you. And the purpose of this is that they worry that, someone might press up the ballot against the outer envelope and hold it up to the light and maybe figure out who you voted for. In any event, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has said that additional envelope is essential to the voting process, that if a ballot does not come in its secrecy envelope, it can't be counted. And that has been the rule. And if you want to know more about that, or you want to know how to support Democracy Docket, click on the link to become a free subscriber. You will stay up to date on all of the election news in Pennsylvania and around the country. And it is the best way to show support for the hard work that the team at Democracy Docket does to keep you up to date. But in any event, Paige, this issue, like I said, has been very controversial, but there's another provision of Pennsylvania law that has largely been overlooked until now, which says that a voter can show up on election day and cast a provisional ballot. Now, it's provisional to make sure that people don't vote twice, right? It is provisional on the first vote, not counting. So the Pennsylvania Supreme Court was finally confronted with, well, how do we reconcile these two provisions between the one hand that says that a naked ballot can't count and the second that gives the right to provisional voting? And in a really important decision, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court 4-3 said that the right to cast a provisional ballot is still in place for people who have realized that they cast a naked ballot. And that makes sense, Paige, because you would say that when in doubt, where you have these two provisions and you're not quite sure how they hang together, you should enfranchise the voter. And this is a good ruling for the people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's a good ruling for democracy. But of course, Paige, you know what that means. It's a terrible ruling for the Republican Party and Donald Trump that staked a lot on this case. They staked a lot. They went to the state Supreme Court thinking that they'd win this case, and they lost. And Paige, it is just the latest in a string of losses by the Republican Party.
Yes, Mike, every day this week, the Republican Party has lost a lawsuit in a major swing state, Michigan, Georgia, now Pennsylvania. We have a full recap of all of these cases and the losses up on our website now, so be sure to click the link to check that out. But Marc, I just want to reinforce something you said, that this provisional ballot is only counted if they confirm that the mail-in ballot was rejected. Again, people are only voting once. The whole situation at stake here is that someone submitted a mail-in ballot. It was rejected. It will not be counted. They now have the opportunity to go vote in person, vote a provisional ballot. And once officials confirm that the mail-in ballot was rejected and will not be counted, the provisional ballot will be counted. And Marc, some people may say, why is that necessary? You made a mistake. That's on you. Your ballot should be rejected. But, when you go vote in person and you make a mistake, there are poll workers there to help you and correct it, give you a new ballot. If you mark it inadvertently, if you forget to do something, someone is there in person to make sure that your ballot is counted, and mail-in voters deserve that same opportunity.
Yeah, and look, our system should not be looking to find traps for the unwary, right? Our system should not be punitive towards voting. Voting should be celebrated. Voting should be the default thing that we all want to have happen. We should want every eligible American to be able to register to vote, to be able to cast a ballot, and have their vote counted. And so the fact that you have the Republican Party spending all of this money, millions of dollars in all of these cases to try to figure out a nook and a cranny here and a loophole there and a MAGA rule someplace else, simply to try to make it harder to vote, simply to try to find ways to wag their finger at citizens and say, too bad, we figured out a way for your ballot not to count. It's just shameful and it's terrible. And it is good to see, as you point out, that literally every day this week, Republicans have lost in court in this effort. That, for all of the cynicism that people have about our courts, you know what, Paige, this week and in the last few weeks, they're showing that they're standing up for voters and democracy.
It's been a good week for democracy, Marc. I want to talk about these naked ballots a little more because how big of a problem actually is it in Pennsylvania that voters submit naked ballots? How many votes are we talking about that have been rejected because of this issue?
Look, we don't know what it will be this go around. We know that in 2020, there was a major issue around this, and we know that there was a major education campaign, and there were still a large number of naked ballots. But, Paige, I want to say that I don't think this ruling is going to be confined just to naked ballots, right? The right to vote provisionally could be a solution for all kinds of problems that we have talked about before. For example, voters who forget to date or sign their ballots, right? They can now say, you know what? I forgot to put the date. I'm going to go vote provisionally, right? This is the fact that provisional voting is now an option to resolve some of the problems that we have talked about in Pennsylvania is a good thing for democracy, is a good thing for voting. And in a close election, it can be the difference between winning and losing.
Right, Mike, we don't know how many ballots could be affected yet in Pennsylvania. They're still coming in. People are still sending them in. We do have a bit of data from Philadelphia County in Pennsylvania, which of course is the city of Philadelphia, the biggest city in the state, the most populous city in the state. It's where a lot of voters are. As of Tuesday morning, over 24,000 mail-in ballots had been returned in Philadelphia County. Over 3,000 mail-in ballots had been rejected. And so far, and over 1,200 of those ballots were because of date issues, signature issues, or they were naked ballots. We've talked about undated and wrongly dated ballots before. Voters wrote the wrong date on the return envelope, they forgot to sign it, or they've submitted a naked ballot, which means that nearly 40% of the rejected mail-in ballots so far in Philadelphia County are because of technical mistakes by the voters that perhaps they should be given the opportunity to cast a provisional ballot to correct.
Yeah, we don't want to be trapping voters. Like, we don't want to be like wagging our fingers at voters. We want to be helping voters vote. We want to be making sure that there's parking at polling locations, that there are not long lines. We want to make sure voter registration is not too onerous. We don't want to be finding technicalities to kick people out of their civic obligation and their civic right. And it feels like so many of these videos we keep talking about over and over again, the efforts by Republicans to find technicalities, to find ways to disqualify voting. And it is the sign of an unhealthy political party that is what they have fallen, that is what they are left trying to do to win.
Let's talk about how the Republican Party and the RNC got involved in this specific lawsuit about naked ballots. What's the background in this case?
Yeah, like a lot of cases, Paige, this does not have the most, glorious beginnings. This involved two votes in Butler County stemming from the primary election in Pennsylvania, which, as you know, was not a barn burner since the candidates were, at least at the top of the ticket, were running largely unopposed. And originally the local board said can't count the ballots because they're naked ballots. The Commonwealth Court, the lower court in this case, sided with the voters and concluded that it was an error not to count the provisional ballots. But what happened next is like the most predictable thing. The Republican National Committee jumped in, and the state Republican Party jumped in and appealed this to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court because they didn't want these two ballots to count, because they thought they had the inside opportunity to shut down voting going into the general election. The Democratic National Committee, and kudos to them and their legal team, they jumped in, and a bunch of others filed amicus briefs. My law firm filed amicus briefs on behalf of a set of organizations that were concerned about this. And Republicans argued that Butler County voters should not have been allowed to have their provisional ballots counted. They thought that they would be able to pull this off. They did not. They have been fighting these fights tooth and nail. But good news, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled the way they did today.
And Mark, like you said, this whole lawsuit started with 2 votes, but its impact could have this. Mark, like you said, this whole lawsuit started with 2 votes in Butler County, but it could now impact hundreds, if not thousands of votes across the state of Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania, obviously a very important presidential swing state. They have a really important Senate race as well. Republicans are trying to get as many votes as possible disqualified in Pennsylvania because they know they have incredibly tight margins there. Obviously, one of the biggest questions to come out of this ruling, Mark, is how will a voter know that they submitted a naked ballot? Pennsylvania famously does not begin processing and counting mail-in ballots until Election Day itself. So what are voters supposed to do until then if they've already submitted a mail-in ballot?
Yeah, so there are a couple of ways people can know. The first is some voters will wind up having cast the ballot and then realize after they cast the ballot, wait, I have this extra envelope. Or, oh my God, I forgot to put it in the security envelope, or, I forgot to date it or sign it, whatever. Like people, oftentimes realize mistakes. I mean, we've all had this experience where you do something and you're like, damn, I just realized the thing I didn't do it exactly right? So some voters will self-correct. So in other instances, the counties themselves may figure it out. They may look at there's a hole on each ballot, and they may look and see that there's no yellow envelope, and therefore there's not a security envelope. They may be able to feel it and just feel like that they're what they're feeling is a piece of paper, not feeling a security envelope. And some counties will then notify folks, other counties won't. But the fact is, what's important here, Paige, is that whatever way the voter figures it out, there is no reason why the state should tell that voter that they can't then show up and vote and cast a provisional ballot. As you said, they are still only voting once, and they should be not disenfranchised. And so this is a good day for democracy. And if you want to stay up to date on all of the news about democracy and elections and Republican voter suppression and what happens in the post-election, I'm telling you, go to Democracy Docket right now and subscribe for free. It is the best way to stay up to date on everything going on and make sure that you are an informed voter and an informed citizen. Thanks for watching this episode of Democracy Docket, and we'll see you next time.